Welcome back, Deep Divers. Today, we're going to tackle the book of Exodus.
Exodus, huh? Now that's a big one. Lots to unpack there.
It is. But lucky for us, we've got a guide. We're diving in with Pastor Jair Pintor's study from the Instituto Bíblico do Brasil.
Sounds good to me. I'm always up for a good deep dive, especially with a guide like that. What's Pastor Pintor's take on this book?
Well, he calls Exodus a prime example of God's pedagogy.
Pedagogy. Okay, you got to break that down for me.
Right. Pedagogy, it basically means God's teaching methods.
Yeah.
How he shapes and strengthens the faith of his people.
So it's like how God works with humanity to teach them.
Yeah, exactly. And Exodus is all about God's dramatic intervention in history, freeing the Hebrews from 430 years of slavery in Egypt.
Right, the Exodus, parting the Red Sea, plagues, the whole shebang. But hang on, wasn't this God's chosen people? How'd they end up slaves in the first place?
Well, it's a reminder that even the chosen people can stray from the path. The study points out how they started clinging to other guides and idols.
Idols? Like what?
Well, they mention a god called El, and these household idols called Teraphim. Sort of like good luck charms or household deities.
So their faith had gotten a bit diluted, you could say. Makes sense.
It's like they had to hit rock bottom before they cried out to the God of their forefathers.
And that's where Moses enters the picture, right? One of the most fascinating figures in the whole Bible.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
talk about a life story. Prince in Pharaoh's court, raised with every luxury imaginable. Then suddenly he's a shepherd in Midian.
Yeah, what a shift. From palaces to tending sheep, it's like two completely different lives. The study mentions he spent 40 years in each.
Almost like God was preparing him for something big, wouldn't you say? And then there's that famous burning bush encounter.
The moment God calls Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, I've always pictured Moses instantly saying, yes, let's do this.
Me too. But Pastor Pintor suggests there was some pushback. Like Moses actually tried to bargain his way out of it.
Really? He resisted. That makes him way more relatable. I mean, wouldn't you be a little hesitant to take on Pharaoh?
Totally. It highlights the human side of Moses, his doubts and fears, even though he was chosen for this epic mission.
This study also touches on his relationship with his wife, Zipporah. Apparently, that adds another layer of complexity to his story.
Yeah, real-life challenges, even for someone chosen by God. So we've got Moses, this reluctant hero, the Israelites crying out for deliverance, and now he's got to go head-to-head with Pharaoh.
Talk about a tense showdown. The ultimate power struggle, God's authority versus Pharaoh's earthly power.
And when Pharaoh refuses to budge, boom, the plagues. Like something out of a disaster movie. Blood, frogs, hail, darkness, you name it.
Wow. And I remember reading something about how the Egyptian magicians were initially able to mimic some of those plagues.
Like a magic battle. It's wild.
Right. God versus the Egyptian gods. Talk about an epic showdown.
But of course, those magicians eventually hit a wall. Even they had to acknowledge a power greater than their own.
But Pharaoh, still stubborn as a mule.
Which leads us to Passover, one of the most powerful events in the whole Bible. Imagine the scene. Israelites marking their doors with lamb's blood, the angel of death passing over.
Chilling. Such a vivid image. And so deeply symbolic. The Apostle Paul connects the Passover lamb to the sacrifice of Christ, a foreshadowing of God's ultimate plan.
It's more than just a historical event. It's a cornerstone of faith. God's power on full display, freeing his people from oppression.
And then, boom, the Exodus. Crossing the Red Sea, that pillar of cloud and fire leading the way. It's incredible. So they're free from Egypt? Now what? They're in the wilderness? Where do they go?
Yeah, talk about starting from scratch. No map, no GPS, just that pillar of cloud and fire to guide them. Must have been terrifying and exciting.
Well, the study points out this is where God's, what was it?
God's pedagogy.
Yes, God's pedagogy. It really kicks in. The wilderness becomes this, like, training ground for their faith.
So it's not about the destination, it's the journey, right? All the lessons they learn along the way.
Exactly. Remember, they'd been in Egypt for centuries, surrounded by a totally different culture.
So they needed to, like, relearn how to be God's people.
Right. And Pastor Pintor says that process wasn't always easy.
Yeah, no kidding. Wilderness living doesn't sound like a vacation.
Not to mention the dangers. The study talks about how they faced, harsh conditions, threats from other groups.
Like the Amalekites,
The
right?
Amalekites, yeah. So it wasn't just about trusting God for food and water. It was about protection, too.
Okay, so we've got this challenging environment, potential enemies, and how did they even survive day to day? I mean, where did they get food, water?
Right. That's where God's provision comes in. I mean, think about it. Manna from heaven, food literally appearing on the ground every morning.
Oh, yeah, the manna. I remember that from Sunday school. But water, where'd they get water in the desert?
From a rock. It's in the study. God made water gush from a rock.
Wow. Miracles, right? God really took care of them.
It's like more than just basic needs, you know? It was a sign showing them he was there, taking care of them.
And all this leads them to, well, one of the most famous mountains in the Bible, Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai. This is a huge turning point, right? Not just a pit stop.
Right. It's where God reveals the law to Moses, the 10 Commandments, the whole deal.
The 10 Commandments, yep. But also statutes and judgments, basically a guidebook for how to live in a covenant relationship with God.
Hold on. So the 10 Commandments I get, but what are these statutes and judgments?
They get into the details, you know, everyday stuff. How to handle arguments, treat animals, even religious festivals. It's like God's giving them this blueprint for a just and harmonious society.
Wow. Pretty amazing when you think about it. God cared about every aspect of their lives, not just the big stuff.
And the study points out this emphasis on justice, especially for the vulnerable, like widows, orphans, the poor.
It's like building a society that reflects God's character.
Right.
A society based on love and righteousness.
Exactly. And it all goes back to that covenant. You know, God choosing them as his people, promising to bless them, but they had to hold up their end of the bargain too.
It's like a two-way street, right? Commitment on both sides.
That's it. Mutual trust and commitment.
So we've got the law, the covenant,
Yeah.
and wasn't there something else? Something built at Mount Sinai.
Oh, you mean the tabernacle?
The tabernacle, right. That was sort of like a portable temple, wasn't it?
It was, and it wasn't just a tent, you
Yeah.
know. It was this meticulously designed structure built exactly to God's specifications.
Every detail had a purpose. It's a symbolic meaning.
Right. The study encourages us to see it as like a foreshadowing of Christ's sacrifice. It points to God's plan for redemption.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What kind of symbolism? What are we talking about here?
Well, the altar, for instance, it represents Christ's sacrifice on the cross.
Oh, wow.
And the Holy of Holies, the inner chamber, that's God's presence. And all those curtains and veils, they represent the separation between humanity and God.
And Christ bridges that gap, right?
Exactly. It's like this incredible puzzle full of layers of meaning. Pastor Pintor says it deserves a deep dive of its own, really.
Definitely. And speaking of roles, didn't God choose Aaron and his sons to be the priests?
He did, to serve at the tabernacle, offer sacrifices, all that.
But when you think about it, the priesthood takes on this whole new meaning after what we've talked about.
It does, doesn't it? They were like intermediaries.
Right.
Between God and the people, and their role points to that need for, you know, atonement, to bridge that gap between humanity and God's holiness.
Just like Christ would later do.
That's it. And while in the Old Testament it was just Aaron and his lineage, in the New Testament it's all believers.
We were all priests, right?
Yeah, correct.
Able to approach God directly.
So the question is, if we're all priests now, what are our sacrifices? What does that mean for us today?
That's a good question. But, you know, even with all this divine guidance, the Israelites still struggled.
Oh, yeah, they had their moments.
Yeah, well, there's the whole golden calf incident.
Right. Talk about a step backward. It's like they went from miracles in the law to, boom, instant idolatry.
What happened? They forgot everything God had just done for them.
I think Pastor Pintor suggests it was fear, uncertainty. Remember, Moses was up on Mount Sinai for a while, and the people down below, they panicked.
They needed something to see, something tangible, right, to represent God.
That's it. They wanted something they could control.
It's almost funny, you know. They'd just escaped Egypt, a land full of idols, and here they are making their own.
It's that human nature, right? We're prone to wander, even after experiencing God's power firsthand. It's a reminder for us, too. We can create our own golden calves today, things we put above God.
Makes you wonder, what are our golden calves today? What are we tempted to put on a pedestal?
A good question for all of us, and it shows how that ancient story is still relevant today, you know?
Absolutely. So we've seen it all in this part. Liberation, provision, the law, the tabernacle, the priesthood, and even those moments of, well, temptation. What happens next? Where do we go from here?
Well, in part 3, we'll look at what happens after the golden calf. God's forgiveness, the Israelites' journey continuing, and, you know, the ultimate message of hope that comes out of all this.
So last time we left off with that golden calf incident. Pretty shocking, right? After all God had done, they just went back to idolatry. What was Moses' reaction?
Well, you know, he wasn't exactly thrilled. Imagine coming down from Mount Sinai, tablets in hand, and seeing that.
Yeah, I bet he was furious.
He was. The study even says he smashed the tablets, the Ten Commandments, in anger.
Wow. Shows how seriously God takes idolatry. But I mean, God didn't, like, wipe them all out, did he?
No, there are consequences, but Pastor Pintor emphasizes God's mercy too. It's this balance, right? Justice and grace.
Right, so it's not just punishment.
Not at all. Moses actually steps in, pleads with God for forgiveness, and God listens. He relents, doesn't destroy them.
Phew. Talk about a close call. It reminds me how even when we make huge mistakes, God can still forgive us.
Exactly. Second chances. It's a huge theme throughout the Bible, really.
It's encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah.
Knowing that we can always turn back to God. But how does Exodus end? What happens after all this?
Well, the Israelites continue their journey, still lots of ups and downs, grumbling, doubts, those kinds of things.
Typical, right.
Pretty much. But the point is, God remains faithful. He doesn't give up on them.
That's reassuring. We might mess up, but God's always there. Always faithful.
Always. And eventually, the tabernacle's finished. And this is a powerful image because the study says the presence of God fills it.
It's like after all that drama, a sign of reconciliation, God's still with them.
Exactly. Covenant renewed. And I think that's a key takeaway from Exodus. Even when we stray, break that covenant, God's grace is still there.
It's like a reminder that there's always a way back.
Absolutely. A path to restoration.
It's a pretty amazing journey when you think about it, starting with a bunch of people enslaved, forgetting God, and ending with them, well, on the edge of the promised land, God's presence right there with them.
It really shows God's power and love, doesn't it? He never gives up.
So inspiring. It reminds us that no matter what we go through, our journey is ultimately toward God, toward something better.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into Exodus. I hope you've all enjoyed this journey with us. What's one thing you hope listeners take away from this book, from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is learning to trust God, even when things are tough, when we're lost in our own wilderness, so to speak. Remember God's guidance, His provision. He's always there for us.
Beautifully put. And remember, even when we mess up, even when we build our own golden calves, God's grace is there. He's ready to forgive, to pick us up, to set us back on the right path. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new, and maybe it even sparked some deeper reflection on your own journey with God.